Konnichiwa. I lived in Sapporo Hokkaido and Yokohama, and then Tokyo when I was like much older. I've been highly influenced by Japan and its culture, and I spoke it fluently as a child. Yamaha is Japanese, that's a Japanese company, and you know, a lot of the music equipment is from Yamaha. And Sony is also originally a Japanese company. It's branched out to different places around the world, but it's generally Japanese. We are such a world that's influenced, highly influenced by anime and video games. Very much inspired by a composer named Ryuichi Sakamoto. And his background actually comes from an electronic background. He has a long history in production back in, I think, in the 70s. In fact, Issey Miyake was known to have instrumental and very interesting music for his personal fashion shows. Probably in the 50s, very first music software that was out there was actually called Music. I think I was in Japan when this exhibition was around. This is a very old catalog that I saved from Japan in 1995. So most likely a collector's piece at this stage, but this was a show that Issey Miyake did in Japan just after he constructed his Pleats Please. The piece that I'm wearing is based off of his piece, but I actually made this piece. So this is one of the pieces I made because I worked as a designer assistant and all that stuff in the past. I didn't meet Issey Miyake, but I did go to his show and I worked for his friend in Tokyo. Ryuichi Sakamoto and Issey Miyake, that somewhere along the lines, both Sakamoto-san and Miyake-san did actually work together and team up for particular projects because they kind of broke barriers, right, during the 70s. Along with the designer I apprenticed for, Jürgen Lell, I was the apprentice who was busy organizing the materials and the samples. So it was interesting to see and to experience actually learning from one of the masters, which was amazing. Okay, this was a very large-ish realism piece that I did. It's considered a value study, which is where you kind of incorporate mainly grays in the painting. I did have a photograph in front of me, so I did choose technically one that was of gray contrast. It is always important as somebody who creates art to understand a value study, because before you get into understanding color, this is the first and basic foremost format. And this is more or less the time when I started creating Nomadics LLC, and then obviously the clothing I had, and then developing the Poshmark and creating designs and former projects. Fashion played a very big role in societal changes. The reason why it's important to be that polymyth right now is because what needs to happen is we need to see AI as a collection of layers. It is like a layer, like it speaks on many different levels. And Sony was not Sony, but it was called Tokyo Tsushin Kyogyo, which, as it says, translates to Tokyo Telecommunication Engineering Corporation, which was run by Akio Morita. That was pushed, I think that was pushed from the 50s after World War II, and the connection between the West and the East became stronger because technology was obviously something everybody needed. The Walkman became like this huge hit. And during that time, he, as the creator of, or the developer of the company, needed a uniform because I think Japan is known for uniforms basically, and uniforms became like a big part of the development and construction of the starting point. So he actually hired Issey Miyake to create this jacket. It's like this tan grayish jacket that's unzipped on the sides of the arms. After World War II, there was like this change of a look and appearance, and instead of it being made out of like the cottons that most people would generally create like back then, like pieces, this was more like a shinier, like this. This is actually one of Issey Miyake's collectible pieces. A shinier, soft fiber. And I think in the 80s it was then constructed for the purpose of having people remove the sleeves. So during the summertime they could remove the sleeves. There was a zip in the front and 2 zips on the sides, so both arms could be detached. And that was the connection between Issey Miyake and Sony before Sony became Sony. The next part of Sony is the connection between CBS Entertainment. So in the end, Sony became Sony strictly because it was now the mold between the entertainment and the electronic side of music. Between that, you also had Yamaha. Yamaha was, obviously we know Yamaha has been making musical instruments for decades. Basically entered the connection with technology. So they watched the process of Sony's evolution of technology and kind of sifted their way through that concept and like refined it. And then they became known as a company not just making synthesizers, which was like the thing for Yamaha, and then obviously you have like the pianos and all those things, musical instruments. But what they're really known for are the chips that are made inside the computer softwares and computers, which is now actually being used in Silicon Valley. So there's like a whole connection of the electronic side, which is very interesting. Going back into Apple, we all use Apples now, right? Steve Jobs had seen these uniforms that were being created by Issey Miyake. He actually asked Issey Miyake to design him a uniform for his company, which was Apple. We've all used Apples, and during the 80s, I was definitely using Apple. My dad had one of the first Apples. I remember that little tiny box. I don't know where it went. And then we had the continuations of, there was actually an Apple laptop that came out with this color, which was interesting. That's Steve Jobs. One of the uniforms for the American company, but the American staff said absolutely no way, Jose. So they decided to throw it out the window, but in the end, Steve Jobs decided that he likes the outfit, so he had Issey Miyake create this one shirt that he was constantly wearing all over the place. Every time people would see him, he would have this black top. So that was actually designed by Issey Miyake. So that this whole technology is actually vastly connected. And the fact that they're all simplistic in their concepts and ideas just makes it even more fascinating, because back then, like, everything was just the simplicities. Sony not only does just music entertainment, but it goes into PlayStation and movies, and it's just like branched out to this really large, like, it's not just one sector. And larger companies, if you've noticed, or if people have noticed, are not just one thing. They don't just stick to one idea. They literally branch out to larger visions and larger concepts. This is an Issey Miyake jacket designed in 1996. I found this jacket on Poshmark, which was very odd. And I was like, this doesn't look like an Issey Miyake, because I don't recognize him to do these kind of patterns and shapes and threading, and it was just so interesting. And only to find out that Issey Miyake played a role at Sony kind of makes it even more curious because this was during the time, not the 80s, but the mid 90s is when this was constructed. But it clearly shows, I see it as music waves, like sound waves. Sound waves. I mean, it's patterns, but I don't know. I'm as somebody who's a musician as well, I just feel as if this has a very sound wave look to it. I think somehow there was an inspiration there. Okay, and this, I think this was just before he started making his Pleats Please. I'll tell you, this is Issey Miyake. Issey Miyake. And I'll just show you the tag. The tag says IM43FC504. Says size 2. So this was created originally for I think it was a biker's motor, like a biker's collection, but I think it's for guys and girls. It landed up on Poshmark, but the lady who had the jacket was actually living in Japan. And when I started talking to her in Japanese, I could tell, or a little bit of Nihongo, I could tell she wasn't Japanese because she didn't respond in Nihongo. So I was like, okay, so obviously we know that she's not Japanese, but she's living in Japan. And I asked where, doko in Japan, where in Japan? And she said around, like, I don't know, like around Tokyo, right? And I was like, this is so interesting. So I'm living in the States, this jacket arrives, but the jacket arrives from Poshmark where I'm selling my stuff, right? So this is like super weird. Then I say, listen, I lived in Japan, I went to ESIJ, and she says, oh my gosh, I live around the corner from ESIJ.